Your cartoon, you realize, is an illustration, not the actual reality of the situation.
He says depicting erosion as filling up a hole is unrealistic. That's one of the most not smart things I ever heard in my life. This atheist is quite absurd to say that erosion isn't destructive, which is what he's saying when he pretends a hole can be preserved for a long time without intelligent design. The cowardly atheist didn't even try to give footage of a hole being preserved because he doesn't have this evidence, nor any evidence for his crazy claim that erosion could quarantine a hole to save it from being filled up eventually. Erosion is picky, apparently, deciding to wreak havoc only in some places. Special pleading fallacy atheist. Nature must follow the atheist narrative. Here's a free science lesson for the atheist who is more ignorant than a kindergartner, or pretends to be.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
And that's reality. And the reason for that is exactly what you said, except you interpreted it exactly backwards from how it actually applies. Let me just replay that as a reminder.
You're always going back to square one because there is no mind, therefore there is no discrimination, therefore there is no intention to preserve any part of the beach to build upon it later.
Right, so there is no mind, there is no discrimination, there is no intention to preserve any part of the beach. Precisely. There's no willful entity intentionally returning the beach back to square one exactly how it was before.
I never said exactly how it was before, liar. I'm so logical. You look at the term going back to square one and jump to conclusions. What translates is only loss of progress, not absolutely all things. The context of my message made it clear, but you were clearly unwilling to face my actual argument, you pathetic coward. I always made it clear that this argument is about order level. So going back to square one is about order level, obviously. Damn, you need to be spoon-fed.
To produce more extreme change. Small changes in...
It's not about extreme change, it's about order level. See, I made it very clear. My argument is about order, it's not about extremity of difference or anything like that.
in large quantity are preserved over time, which over a long period of time amounts to a very large change. In a million years, that beach will look a lot different than it does right now. Looking different and very different is not the same as having a greater level of order. You're changing the subject, you're moving the goalpost, you cheater, you coward, from order level to just how it looks. Oh, it's very different. It doesn't matter that it's very different. That's absolutely irrelevant. What matters is only if there is greater order and greater order to the level of a sandcastle by erosion, or in other words, that level of order mindlessly achieved from scratch, pretty much. You can't do that. That's why you're moving the goalpost.
same mindless forces that create things will destroy them. How are you going to advance with such a regressive method as that?
Well, if you want, look at humanity. The same mindless forces that create a human destroy a human. Your biology brings you to life, and your
Biology brings you to life. Actually, this is very misleading because you have not proven that nature created mankind from scratch. Therefore, this is a false equivalency fallacy. Again, you're illogical. Although that's a specious argument. It's a false equivalency fallacy because you cannot prove that that mankind came about mindlessly, naturalistically. There is no natural way for mankind to come about. You can't even come up with an unintentional sandcastle, let alone unintentional life. You want to jump over mountains, but you can't even put your shoes on. Come on. Also, there was another thing I wanted to say, but I'm trying to remember what you said, which prompted that thought of mine. You said, oh yeah, it was about that. So yeah, it was the other part, it was death. Yes, death will lead to destruction and degradation, decrease in the order level. When we decompose, then there's usually less order than before. Like the skeletal structure is not in the orderly position that it used to be in. It's just, it's thrown on the beach or whatever. But yeah, you committed a false equivalency fallacy as covered. You're a very specious guy, so your arguments look right, but once I scrutinize them, they're just shit, because false equivalency fallacy is shit. At the end of the day, you're just desperately grasping at straws, atheist, fanatic.
Your biology causes your death, and yet our population keeps growing and we keep thriving. Strange.
The population keeps growing? Now you're changing the subject from one individual dying to all of mankind continuing. You're conflating these things. Not only did you commit a false equivalency fallacy, but also now you're conflating the entire population of mankind, or a greater population, with the individual scenario that you gave. Unless you're saying all of mankind gets wiped out by nature and then they resurrect. What? No, that's not what you meant. Specious.
Every single one of us has a beginning and an end, and yet the species survives.
Conflating individual with collective. Wow, man. You're grasping at straws at every turn.
Mystery.
Look at you really drowning in the illogic. Drowning in the logic, trying to find something that looks logical. But it isn't really. As I think.
Is it? Because there is no creation or destruction. There's a dynamic world where destruction of one thing is creation of another.
Oh, you're trying to sound philosophical here. An atheist trying to sound deep, saying that the creation of one thing is the destruction of another. Generally, that's true. However, that's a red herring fallacy. Why are you telling me this? I already know. Also, that's rather subjective in some cases because, well, that doesn't matter because it's a red herring fallacy.
The creation of a river is a destruction of the rock layers it carves through. The destruction of those rock layers is the creation of new layers of sediment in the ocean.
A rock layer? Really? A rock layer? That's what you consider to be orderly? A sandcastle has way more order than that. A sandcastle has way more patterns. The more patterns, the more the order.
Ocean. The destruction of the oceanic crust it settles on potentially heralds the creation of a new mountain range in the future as continents.
A mountain range. See, you're moving the goalpost from the level of a sandcastle's order to now giant mounds of earth called mountains. Why don't you just shit out a mound of shit? Why don't you just defecate a mound of shit and put that forth as your argument, Sockman?
That we're not dealing with a static system here. We're dealing...
Oh, I'm not dealing with a static system. Good job taking down that strawman, atheist. You must feel like you accomplished something.
With the Earth. It has enormous heat energy inside of it. It has plate tectonics. It has abundant energy coming from the sun. It has a dynamic atmosphere, organic material, a food chain of beings coming to life and eat.
Wait. Organic material coming to life? You have no proof of this.
We're dealing with a static system here. We're dealing with the Earth. It has enormous heat energy inside of it. It has plate tectonics. It has abundant energy coming from the sun. It has a dynamic atmosphere, organic material, a food chain of beings coming to life and eating other beings and then being eaten themselves.
Coming to life. You're looking at a snow globe that's already designed and saying, hey man, when you shake this, snow comes about. So all it takes to create a snow globe is shaking, and nature shakes with earthquakes, so an earthquake can create a snow globe with the right conditions. No, it takes intelligent design. That's too orderly. You can't come up with you can't give me footage of an unintentional sandcastle. How can you give me an unintentional snow globe then? And this talk about life arising, that's an allusion to abiogenesis, your alchemy shit, your superstition of atheist, deluded fanatics who blindly believe in that shit with absolutely no evidence whatsoever, because amino acids don't count as evidence, or else so do farts, since both are found in living things and can be imagined to become life, but have no life. And that's unfalsifiable, therefore unscientific. Give me a plausible falsification scenario for your atheist alchemy of abiogenesis to prove that is even a scientific explanation, sockman. But of course, you're not going to do that. No atheist I challenge.
There is no creation or destruction on the Earth. There's change, and there are systems, there are cycles, and there's a constant input of energy powering the whole thing. Now, if you were talking about some dead planet floating a million light years from any star, I would agree with you. There's nothing dynamic about such an object that would allow it to sustain any meaningful change.
Meaningful change? Well, meaningful is a subjective term, especially when you're using it, because it would be meaningful if you could show that that a sandcastle can be unintentional, as that would prove me wrong. But you can't do that. And I set the bar very low for you. And you keep wanting the bar to be even lower, because you can't do that little hop.
But in that case, of course, your example of the hole on the beach really has no relevance, because what's going to dig the hole? What's going to fill it in? There's nothing happening. But that's not what happens on the Earth. When a change on a beach is erased to the superficial observer, when death happens to an organism, there's nothing irretrievably lost, aside from the exact...
Nothing irretrievably lost is a strawman fallacy, because I never said there was anything irretrievably lost. Although you could say that the exact conditions and the exact temperature of every little area in that zone and the exact alignment of the stars coinciding with that could never be replicated, perhaps. But I'm not even saying that. I'm just thinking about that.
Exact, precise configuration of the thing. But all of its components are still there and very active.
It doesn't matter, because you don't have an unintentional sandcastle. It doesn't matter, because mindlessness has no intention to preserve order, therefore it will not build upon it. You're changing the subject to merely differences. It doesn't matter that there are differences. It doesn't matter that you imagine life can come from non-life. You have zero evidence and zero proof. You are absolutely impotent and pathetic.
There was no actual act of destruction. It was just changed. And that change will contribute to how things are in the future. To new life, for example, or new arrangements of...
New life? Really? New life from what? Show me life from non-life. You don't have proof.
The beach. You're not thinking about the Earth as a dynamic system.
I know it is a dynamic system. The fact that I'm pointing to erosion shows it is a dynamic system. Because erosion is dynamic. Wind can come from different directions. That's dynamic. Water can splash or flow in. That's dynamic.